Hi, I'm attorney Greg Dell, joined by attorney Rachel Alters, and we're going to talk about Principal Financial. And Rachel, I want to talk about the disability denial reasons that you most commonly see from Principal. A lot of people call us. We've reviewed hundreds, if not thousands, of Principal denials. What's the most common reason, starting with, that you hear for a Principal denial?
Usually the calls I get are most commonly change of definition, where people are initially approved and then after 24 months the definition in the policy changes from whether you can do your own occupation to whether you can do any gainful occupation. I see those denials a lot.
And what's significant about that? Because people, a lot of people don't even know where the definition comes from.
Right.
So where does that definition come from, and is it in every policy?
Yeah, most group policies do have this definition change. So when you initially apply for the benefits, the definition of disability is whether you can do the material substantial duties of your own occupation, and then that's as it's defined in the national economy, which we can get into next. And then after 24 months, the insurance carrier looks at whether you could do any gainful occupation, and a lot of times it's also, can you do any gainful occupation that you're reasonably educated to do and trained to do, and then earn 60% of your pre-disability income. So there's also an income component to it. But it is harder to meet that standard than it is to meet your ONOC standard. So a lot of times the insurance companies take advantage of that situation, and once that 24 months is up, they're like, well, we've found 3 or 4 jobs, around your, in a 50-mile radius from your home that we believe that you could actually go out and perform, and here's how much money we believe you can earn, and this is 60% of your pre-disability income, therefore we're cutting you off. And people are often surprised by this because not only do people not normally read their policies, no one has explained to them that this is probably going to occur, so it is a shock. And then we get the call, hey, help, I was just cut off, I don't understand why.
And a lot of people have jobs that are sedentary, which means for the most part, they're jobs that require 6 hours or more of sitting per day.
Right.
And that could be their own occupation, which is usually the definition during the first 24 months. So a lot of people think, well, I already have a sedentary type job. How could they find a different type of sedentary job and say that I could do that sedentary job, but I couldn't do my original sedentary type job?
It's amazing that they do this. So, if somebody sits at a desk all day working, as whatever, an accountant,
right,
or maybe an attorney like we are, and they get approved for the ONOC period saying, hey, we believe that you're disabled, that you can't sit at a desk all day long. And then they hire a vocational expert to review your medical records, to review your job description as it is in the national economy. What that means is the policy doesn't look at your job as you perform it every single day at your workplace. It looks at how your job is defined on the Department of Occupational Titles, or ONET, and they look at that only. And if they could pick you up and move you to another office somewhere and you could do that job, then you're not considered disabled. So they look at your job that way. But they hire voc experts, and what they do is they find all these other jobs and they say, well, yeah, maybe you couldn't do your job because here's what your job duties are described as under
Right.
ONET, but we believe you could do this other sedentary job, which, requires maybe less, who knows what, meetings or lifting or whatever it is, it's basically the same thing. So one would think if you can't do one sedentary job, you can't do another, but they don't look at it that way. They look at it as, well, now we think you could do another job. We found these jobs are, they'll find an expert, a peer review expert, to look at your medical records and say either you've improved or they believe that the restrictions and limitations are no longer there, plus we think you could do this other sedentary job. It doesn't always make sense, but they still find ways and reasons to deny the claim based on the fact that they think you could do another sedentary job. So that's why it's so important to work with your doctors to make sure the records are in line.
Right, and that's what I was just about to say, is that when somebody already has a sedentary job, so if someone's watching this video and they're like, well, I've been on claim for a year or a year and a half, what can I be doing in order to prepare for this change of definition? And when we help people with their claims, which we manage claims all the time for people, we try to set up the claim to make it where you can't do any occupation. We don't just limit it to the single occupation. We say any occupation, because like I was saying, if you can't do one sedentary occupation that might be paying you $200,000, you can't do one that's paying you $30,000.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It's the tasks that are required to do that job. A second type of reason for denial that you most commonly see would probably be some kind of limitation in the policy, whether it's for most commonly mental nervous. Can you explain what that is?
Yes. So most group policies will have a 24-month mental nervous limitation, which means if you have a mental health claim that is caused by or contributed to, if your disability is caused by or contributed to by a mental health issue such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, whatever that may be, they will only pay you for 24 months, and they won't pay you a day after that. Oftentimes, and I see this a lot, is a person doesn't always just have a mental health claim. They'll have a mental health claim combined with also a physical disability claim. And also, oftentimes when people are physically disabled and in a lot of pain, they do have depression that's secondary to that physical claim. So it's hard to separate the two. A lot of policies will say, well, if you have mental health that's even contributing to it, we're only paying you 24 months. We're not going to even, will not qualify for a physical disability claim. So you'll see that denial after 24 months, even if the person's claim is mainly physical, because the insurance carriers see that as an out.
Right.
So oftentimes I'll tell people you got to make sure that the physical support for your claim is very strong, because the insurance carrier is going to try and make this a mental health claim so that they don't have to pay you for the next 20 years. So this happens all the time. And if you do get denied, then we have to get on board, work with the doctors, work with you in order to get that physical claim supported and very strong, because oftentimes people don't know. They're like, well, yeah, I got approved for depression, anxiety, and I'm getting paid. I'm like, do you have physical issues? They're like, oh yeah, I had neck surgery, I had back surgery, but they're only paying me on the mental health. Is that a problem? I'm like, yes, that's a big problem. So then they need us to help, remedy that.
Right, and we do see, I would say more than half our claims have some kind of psychological component to them, because if you have a disabling condition, your whole life's turned upside down, and it's depressing.
Yeah.
And so then you either potentially end up on a med, or you end up speaking to someone, and then they start to say, no, you're depressed, it's not your pain, it's not your physical limitations.
Exactly.
So you have to be aware of that, and there's ways to manage that, obviously.
Yeah.
The third reason, and it kind of touches on what we always say all the time, no matter who the company is having strong medical support.
Yeah.
But probably as common as the limitations for mental nervous, the limitations for, change of definition being a reason for disability, as we see this line that's in almost every denial is your subjective complaints are not supported by your objective evidence.
Correct.
What does that mean, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, and that's a tough one too, because there's a lot of physical medical conditions that are, you only rely on subjective complaints of the patient. So there's, when somebody has severe migraines, for example, and they're debilitating, and these are common in a lot of people. Right. And, some people have migraines where they get them 4 or 5 times a week. They're shut down, they have to go into a dark room, they can't think, they can't concentrate. So surely they can't sit at a job 40 hours a week and be able to do, perform well. There's no way to test for migraines. So migraines is something that is based on a subjective complaint of the patient. So oftentimes these insurance carriers will say, well, yeah, maybe he has migraines, but there's no objective testing to prove this. It's based on the subjective complaints of this person, and how do we know that they're not, that they're telling the truth? So, and there's a lot of other disease processes that are also based on subjective complaints, such as fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome. There's a lot of things. You cannot put somebody under an x-ray or an MRI and determine they have these conditions. So oftentimes the insurance companies run with that, and their doctors will review the medical records and go, well, yeah, but this is just based on their subjective complaints, so we're going to deny this because there's no objective testing that shows they actually have this condition and how severe it is. And also with pain, when somebody's in severe pain, whether it's due to a neck issue, a back issue, if someone has MS or whatever is going on with them, pain is also subjective. You cannot measure it through a test. And so if somebody's saying, I've got pain 8 out of 10 every day, I can't sit for long periods, oftentimes the insurance carriers, their peer review doctors will say, well, this is a subjective complaint. There's no objective proof for it, and we disagree with their treating doctors that they're not able to work. So this is often a very difficult thing to fight, because yes, so then we have to go and have them keep a pain log, a headache log, something on a daily basis, so that we can actually show, hey, this is really going on. And again, it's still subjective, but we have to work with the doctors in order to get them to document better. But
Right, and I think that's the biggest challenge in these claims, especially when dealing with principal, is that they more often than not go out and hire outside doctors, whereas a lot of these other companies use their in-house doctors, which at least I think it's good that they go outside, because the in-house doctors are just like almost always finding in favor of the insurance company. At least principal is somewhat trying to go to someone who's not necessarily on their payroll all the time.
They don't want to lose their jobs.
So you get a little bit, it's a little bit better for the claimant, because these other doctors aren't committed to principal. So that's good from that perspective. But like you were saying, it is very, very challenging. I always, I'm surprised that no one has yet to invent a pain machine.
Right.
Like people, like you can't put your finger on something and it goes, okay, your pain level is 7, your pain level is 2. There is no pain machine, and the disability insurance companies know that. So they basically say, look, we're not disputing your symptoms. We're just saying you don't have physical support that objectively should support that, and there's no reasonable basis to support this claim. And they can find a doctor to support that, and then it's like, let's fight.
Yep.
And that's what we do. And there are techniques which we'll talk about in our appeal videos for principal and our lawsuit video about how to overcome that. So if you're somebody out there who has a principal financial disability claim, whether it's short-term or long-term, feel free to reach out to Rachel, myself, any of our disability lawyers. No matter where you live in the country, we're available to assist you, and we'll always provide you with a free consultation.